Welcome to the Great Noticing Podcast with Marianne and Emily.
The Great Noticing is about our awakening as people, professionals, parents, and leaders. Noticing empowers us to unravel the old narratives that dominated and defined us.
Noticing supports new patterns and celebrates behaviors that help us create and step into the life we desire. What are you noticing lately?
Hey, Noticers. Today, we're diving into the heart of philanthropy with the incredible Rose Bradshaw, President and CEO of the North Texas Community Foundation. We'll explore the evolving landscape of giving, how legislation is shaping charitable donations, why Fort Worth has such a unique culture of generosity, and how we can instill a sense of gratitude in the next generation. Whether you're new to philanthropy or looking to make a greater impact, this conversation will leave you feeling empowered and ready to give back. Let's get started. Welcome to The Great Noticing. I'm Marianne Means-Dufresne.
And I am Emily McAnally.
And we're so excited to have the inimitable Rose Bradshaw with us today. Rose serves as President and CEO of the North Texas Community Foundation. Over the course of her career, she's worked with philanthropists, foundations, corporations, and nonprofits across the country, and she ignites powerful and rewarding philanthropy that strengthens local communities. As a resident of Fort Worth, I experience this firsthand in your work every day. Rose, thank you so much for all you do in our community and for being a guest with us today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Marianne and Emily. It's a privilege to be with you.
Yes. And so, Rose, of course, we want to hear about your work in the nonprofit sector and what you see happening these days. So tell us what you're noticing.
Well, of course, in my seat at the Community Foundation, we have the real honor of sitting at this intersection of nonprofit organizations working hard to face challenges or pursue opportunities on behalf of North Texans, and donors who care so much about this community, civic leaders who are working hard to make sure we have good policies that can carry us through and a good infrastructure and systems. But now that I'm 35 years into my career, it's a new chapter right now. And it points to a number of things. One, the tremendous growth we're experiencing here in Fort Worth and in North Texas. And it's terrific news on so many fronts, but it also creates significant challenges on and as we said, the infrastructure, our public school system, land conservation. So in sort of a trend liner, what I'm noticing is that we are very aware that we're in a changing environment, and it's requiring us to be more dynamic and flexible and be able to be open to learning from best practices around the country for other communities that have experienced this. And then to be able to bring those good ideas here. And then, in my mind, really, bring them back home to the best folks we know to get the work done here and to make it our own and to do it the Fort Worth way or the North Texas way. So I see tremendous opportunity there. But what I'm noticing is that folks are traveling around the country to see what they're doing in Charlotte, see what they learned in Houston and other places that have experienced rapid growth, and doing it together. So one example I have is we were so pleased to be invited by the Gates Foundation to lead a delegation from Fort Worth across the country to think about economic mobility. That's really thinking about how do residents have everything they need from housing to good jobs to education to be able to pursue opportunities. And it's been terrific to travel around with some folks from the Community Foundation and from the Rainwater Foundation, from the city of Fort Worth, from TCU, to go look at best practices and learn together. So I love that I'm noticing that in economic mobility. I see it on the affordable housing front. I see it around community land trust and land conservation. So that is a great trend that I feel will serve us well going forward. I'm also noticing a couple of directional things happening in giving, one of which is concerning. The other one is very encouraging to me. The concerning one is, well, the good news is last year there was $560 billion that was put towards philanthropy in the United States. So record high. That's great news. But if you dig into the data, you see that it's actually not keeping up with inflation. When you bring in inflation, we're down 2%. So that trend is not one that we want to see continuing to move in that direction. But that means that we have to be able to make sure we make the case for philanthropy. We can present it as something that is high return on investment. When we align resources behind the right leaders with great ideas and solutions, then we can see progress and we can keep making the case for more funding. So that's how our shop is thinking about it. and that's where I'll wrap up on this note, is for our foundation. If I look over time, we started thanks to Louise Appleman and Mr. Decker over at Decker Jones. They started this foundation in 1981. And they started it because someone had passed away here in Fort Worth, and the money all went to Dallas. Now, I love Dallas for a lot of things, but I don't want them taking our money. We can put it to good work here. So they started this community foundation with $41,000. And they got all the right folks to be on that board, that initial board, to be able to stand up this foundation. And I'm now the third CEO. So I follow Homer Dowd and Nancy Jones, and each one had their part in building this foundation. But we now stand at about $560 million in assets. And last year we granted out $47 million. And to see the growth trajectory that we're on, it's because people care about this town. Hopefully we're continuing to make the case for more investment. And when we can see the results, when we can see that it makes this town a place that everybody can count on for opportunity, and other future generations can have the same experience we did, all the better. So that's kind of stuff I've been noticing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's amazing, Rose. And hearing it so clear, you can hear your passion for this work and for impact. What makes your heart beat fast when you think about the impact that you really want to have in your role at North Texas Community Foundation?
The heart beat fast and excitement and or fear, or trepidation, right? So in either direction, my heart beats fast when I hear the outcomes our students are achieving right now in our school system, our public schools. Not acceptable, right? So that certainly focuses my attention and my concern, and hopefully resources going in that direction. Heart beat fast in the good direction is having a wonderful new superintendent on the case, who has aligning resources behind her vision for our district and for what students will achieve, to see families getting involved. Heart beats fast when I think about Tarrant 2 and through, and the amazing work happening to help kids get from 7th grade through college and career, and the resources that are being lined up behind smart people and good strategies. So that gets me very excited to see people paying attention to the facts and then saying, and what next? And carrying through.
Thinking about tax code and ramifications and those kinds of things, Emily, I bet your mind went there immediately around how upcoming legislation might impact philanthropy. I bet you have a question for Rose on that.
You know me so well. I was wondering, Rose, if just the current political climate and some of the things that are happening with this current administration, from the DOGE effort, et cetera, if you've already experienced some sort of sense of being underneath a microscope, or if that's something that you anticipate moving forward, and how does that make you feel? And how do you plan on handling any sort of increased, what's the word I'm looking for?
Scrutiny.
Increased scrutiny. Yes, thank you.
So we don't mind meaningful legislation or attention to make sure that we're being efficient and effective with our dollars. We're not afraid of that. But we have experienced in the past is sometimes the instinct to develop a solution without understanding what the problem is or what the challenge might be. Give you a quick example is last year the Treasury was, and they're still considering this, they're revising the tax code. It's the last meaningful adjustment that was made was in 2006. So it's been quite some time with Pension Protection Act. And so as they came to look at charitable giving, they realized, after we did a lot of work with Treasury, that they did not understand our business, like community foundations with donor advised funds. And so they were under the impression that we were warehousing a lot of money and that we wanted to just keep the money and earn fees off of it. Now, there may be other players out there that are doing that, but it sure isn't community foundations where we have so many donors who care, want to get dollars out locally. So if that $47 million that was distributed last year, 80% of it stays right here. And what I also love is about 75 to 80% of that money is in general operating support that organizations need so much. So what happens is people develop a trusted relationship and they're confident in that leader and they say, hey, you're the resources you need to get that job done. That's the way we operate. We want transparency. We're open to any scrutiny because we're confident that the processes we have are ones where we're getting the maximum amount of money out to the community. Our fees that we charge to our fund holders, they are designed to say, okay, cover our costs so we can make sure that we are getting the checks where they need to go, the funds are invested, and we're being responsible. But then also, if there's any overage, which is not much, it goes to the convening role. And that's where we recognize there's an issue where we need to understand, bring either the facts, the experts. Community Foundation is so pleased to be able to step up and say, okay, let's bring together the private foundations. Let's bring together the school superintendent, whoever it is that needs to be in the room to be able to improve outcomes for our community. So that's where if there's any extra money, that's what it's coming towards. We're to more grant dollars out in the community. So long answer, we want to work alongside anyone with good intentions for the best outcomes so that we can make sure that we can always instill confidence in this vehicle.
Absolutely. What message would you want legislators to hear about the importance of charitable giving and philanthropy in the U.S.?
Yeah. Well, you heard that $560 billion. You think of all the amazing things that get done with those resources. And it's not always, we think about the super wealthy, but so much of that funding comes from people, school teachers and firefighters and folks who are supporting the local work that means something to them. I would say that we need to recognize that while that $560 billion is important and it's distributed across the country in many powerful ways, the role of the federal government and providing critical services and consistency can't be underestimated. And philanthropy can never fill that gap.
Yeah.
So what philanthropy is best at is providing nonprofits with money to pilot project or to prove something out, to do the research, stand up the effort before government can come in. But hopefully we make the case that it works, and then we figure out how to sustain that work. So I'll give you a quick example. Right now, with the various executive orders that have come through that are impacting our nonprofit sector, we'll see how it plays out. We want to be patient a bit as some of this goes through, but recognize there is an immediate fallout we're seeing because when the federal funds could go to our nonprofit organizations like Meals on Wheels. So Meals on Wheels is doing fantastic work here in North Texas. 34% of their budget is provided through the federal government. Let's think about that. This is an effort that is actually staffed by volunteers. It's every morning go and pick up their meals and then stream across our community. They're going to reach elders who are, essentially shut-ins, who are depending not only on that meal, but also those eyes on them, the conversation. All of that funding goes out and it's reimbursement money. So if they haven't been paid since December 31st, then we create a critical issue and the ability sort of that pipeline to continue. So we have to make sure that we don't cause unintended consequences that are going to be real hard to come back from and could be very serious for an elder who does not get their meal in a week. We could see some real fallout. So I would say to be mindful of the fact that these are critical services, largely led by really qualified people who are accomplishing more with every dollar they get because they stretch it and they use volunteers to make a lot of great work happen. So I would hope we could all work alongside each other to get to the right goals here.
Absolutely. And to continue to incentivize charitable giving.
As someone who gives to my church, I give to a few other organizations, I give to my university. As someone who's interested in getting more involved in philanthropy, both from a volunteer perspective and where would you suggest someone were to start?
It's kind of your local community foundation.
That's right.
But also, there are lots of different folks out there. So it depends on the community that you're in. It's real interesting, Emily, for me to see kind of trends in giving over time, the generational giving, and how that's shifting, and how both nonprofits and volunteers and interested citizens need to kind of pay attention to what they find to be motivating and gratifying, who the donor and volunteer is and what motivates them. And so if you look back at sort of like the greatest generation and, those who experienced World War or the Depression and actually relied on governmental institutions and sacrificed, because the government asked them to sacrifice, their patterns of giving are different. So there was a much more trust in institutions. And I've even looked to my father. So my dad was born in 1925 and my mom in 1929. They gave to hospitals, the library, to institutions that were important to them, that they saw made a difference in their life, and they wanted to keep those institutions going. If there was a new leader at the institution, they weren't so worried about that. They were going to be the perpetual donor that showed up and provided that income stream. There were also really, strong volunteers and blood donors and all those sort of it's our civic duty to show up and do this. And it was a part of their life. And then as you move through to baby boomer, their experience and some becoming kind of a little more distrustful of institutions, experience with the Vietnam War in the 1960s, a lot of the kind of political strife that they experienced. So there's less trust in institutions. And there is also kind of more independence and want to pursue your own life and pursuits. So sometimes that money for charity getting whittled down because other ideas or other demands come up. And so as you kind of move through, life experiences inform your way of giving. So now you look at your generation. So if I think about this, you came up and kind of as you're coming into your own, you have the Great Recession in 2008. You have college becoming less affordable and less accessible. And then you have COVID, right? And so it's very natural that people kind of coming up from 2000 forward into their adult life want to experience the mission. They want to touch it. They want to understand who the leaders are and if they can count on those leaders to deliver. So it's a different donor. And I think that oftentimes kind of nonprofits can operate in the same way they always have been, or we all can, and not realize, okay, the donor today, the volunteer today is looking for an experience. And in my mind, you will get so much more out of that because they'll be personally involved and engaged. And it's really what the model we're going for at the Community Foundation is to create not just check writers where we ask them to give, but actually people who lean in, get to know other leaders, understand the issue, and almost create an activated network of people who are resourceful. Some people have ideas. Some people have the physical capacity to get the work done. Others are the funders. But if we can bring us all together in dialogue, I'm excited for what that can offer. So to your question back to kind of where do you go? In your community, I think pay attention to the groups that are focused on the data, are willing to try new things, and then to be able to offer, as those are developing, there may be no kind of like exact way that they want you to plug in, but show up at the table and help them figure out the way forward for an issue that matters to you. If it's not your issue, don't try and force it. That's what I love about the Community Foundation too. For some folks, it's horses. For others, it's children. For some, it's land. Lean into the thing you love. And I recommend you go deep on that because as our former mayor would say, you can't, spray and pray the dollars around or sprinkle it around and expect a great effect. We want people to get focused and to lean in because you'll be on a learning trajectory too about what's most effective in your giving.
I would love it if there were some sort of website or platform, and maybe we need to develop this, where you could almost take a quiz and go through the process of saying, tell me what what matters to you, what are some issues that you're concerned with, what is your availability, what is your bandwidth like, and then it gets you to here are 5 different organizations that we think are a good fit for you from your volunteer profile. Because I've tried to Google, I live in Richmond, and I've tried to Google, local women's shelters, and it's been very difficult to find an actionable path to get involved. And I'm not from here. I'm from Fort Worth, of course. And so I don't really know where to start. Are you saying that I could Google, Central Richmond Foundation, and there's probably one here, and then I could
there'll be one. Yeah, and I'm
Yeah.
happy to put you in touch with them if you have any trouble reaching. I hope you can reach them. But Emily, you point out something really important and something our community, if anybody knows of where to point me, let me know. But our community right now does not have other communities I live in, they've had active, for lack of a better term, 1980s term volunteer center, but a place that had the data, the needs of the nonprofits, met the volunteers, found the match at what's the right dosage, profile, all that type of thing, an issue, and then matches them up. We don't have that now, but I'll tell you what, thank you for bringing that back up to me because we're in the process of strategic planning and we're trying to think through how can the Community Foundation identify those things, those gaps that we may have and support the development of good solutions.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Yeah. It would be so cool. And this
Keep
is
after me though, Emily, you have to make sure we follow through on that, right?
I would love to, get you in touch with some really, I think like anytime you have that opportunity to engage an end user in some sort of gamification, we love taking quizzes about ourselves, right? Like we love going through the Enneagram and understanding ourselves better. If there's a way to get something in front of people where they're finding out something about themselves at the end of it, which is, here's your volunteer profile. These are the organizations that have a need for your type of volunteer profile.
Emily, I knew that you would go straight to this from a technology perspective because you're right that it's not just people start taking it as a avenue to find a volunteer opportunity, but what they're doing in the process is clarifying around their passion area.
Exactly.
And so there's the rewarding aspect of engaging with the technology in this way that ends up creating a pipeline for volunteerism and eventually dollars. And it wouldn't be that expensive to put that together from a technology perspective, and Community Foundation would be a great group to own it.
Not own it, but fund it.
Yes, that's right. Yes, fund it.
Love like that. Sorry, but no, just to be clear, we love to support great programs and great ideas. It would be the death of them if we tried to house them all.
Yeah.
Because we want smart leaders who can carry that forward.
And I wonder, maybe it's a United Way, it's an organization like that perhaps does granting in their own right, that has the broad perspective in mind. But
A definite need.
Types of things that could be really impactful and powerful. Emily, great idea. There's that startup tech environment serving you well again.
I am very grateful for that experience. As traumatic as it was, I learned a lot.
Hey, noticers, it's a new year. Why not start it with your best skin yet? If you've never experienced the magic of Hannah Azul Korean skincare, you are missing out. Myung Chong has been working her skincare magic for 27 years, creating what's now famously called the Hannah Azul Glow. I've been seeing her for years, and let me tell you, the results are real. My skin feels smoother, brighter, and just better. Her products are packed with medical-grade ingredients that take your glow to the next level. So if your skincare routine could use a reboot, or you just want to feel incredible in your own skin, visit hannahazul.com. That's HANNAISUL.com and see what the hype is all about. Be sure and visit Myung really soon. Trust me, your skin will thank you, and so will future you. Rose, you mentioned the trends in charitable giving, being around the people, younger donors, engaging with the experience and developing connection through their passion area. What are some other trends that you see or that you've noticed in these travels that you've had around the country?
Actually, I'd point to corporate giving, and a lot of people limit it's on the wane. But I would actually argue otherwise. It's actually up if you look at corporate giving.
Really?
And I mentioned that stat around $560 billion in total philanthropic giving. $36 billion of that's from corporate giving, and it's actually up 14%.
Wow.
So it's going up. So companies recognizing the place they operate matters. It matters to their employees. And here in Fort Worth, I swear we are seeing like this golden age of corporate philanthropy. And folks aren't tooting their horn too much, so you may not be aware of it. I'll give you a couple of examples that are just stunning to me, folks we get to work with. First, I have to bring up is Huckabee Architects. So Chris Huckabee and his firm, it's a family firm that's been in business for many years. They're focused on public education. I'll give you an example. They've been giving philanthropically to public schools for a very long time. It's completely separate from their business. And they see where the needs are, and they channel dollars in that direction. But after Uvalde, tragedy in Uvalde, Chris and I were on the phone, and he said, let me know that he was planning to help community of Uvalde build a new school. And I said, Chris, now what does that entail for you? And he said, well, they approached us, the wonderful Beverly Powell, our state senator, lifted up the issue to Chris. And Chris responded, of course, immediately. He said, but she was asking for sort of plans that might come off the shelf because we do public schools. Can we get the architectural plan? And Chris said, but we can't do that. This is a different situation. This is one that's really going to take a lot of care, trauma-informed care, actually, for all the families and everything they've been through. And he said, so this is going to be something special, and we're going to do it right. And I said, Chris, what does it take to do it right? What's that going to cost? Assuming and presuming that the state would be funding a big piece of this. And he said, well, that's the other piece of this. Because Uvalde is such a poor community, they don't have any bonding authority. So they actually have no money to build a new school. So the construction, so they can get the plans from Chris. They have no money to build a new school. And I said, well, Chris, I'm so concerned that you're going to be out on a limb here. Like, how do you do this? And he said, Rose, it's the right thing to do. I was like, okay. So I got off the phone. And I was able to talk to one of our wonderful fund holders, who's obviously, just terrific. And she's a big fan of Chris's too. And she said, oh, Rose, we can't leave him out like that. We got to come behind him. And so she said, let me be the first one in. So she made a significant gift
And the Rainwater Foundation was very powerful in this role. They provided significant gifts. We co-hosted a breakfast with Rainwater, brought together donors. And this community so far has raised $6 million for kids 6 hours away from here who will never know their names, but it's the right thing to do. This story went from Fort Worth, started here in Fort Worth, went to Dallas, went to San Antonio, went to Houston, kind of same model. They've now raised almost $60 million. And Fort Worth raised the most as just from private dollar from our own donors, but they're about to close the gap. And in August of 2026, a new school will open. Beautiful. And of course, the families of you all, this is not a dream to them because they want their children back. But it is a way to step forward, and in a way that says, as the superintendent who was just with us from Uvalde just said, you didn't forget us.
That is powerful.
It's a great story. Turn to Higginbotham. Higginbotham, I sign more checks on the behalf of Higginbotham every week than you can imagine because their producers give a portion of their salary to give back to their community. So I'm writing to the Girl Scouts and, wherever they're working, I am sending checks from their fund here to support that work. And you have volunteers that are going out in the community. They're in so many ways, they are doing it as a family. As Rusty would say, this is their family. And they're giving away as a family and everybody's engaged. So it's super powerful. I look at the Reynolds family and they have an amazing stock ownership program. And ESOP. It's like, what a powerful way to make sure the profits of your company are channeling back into your community. Audubon, they do terrific work every month, every 2 months. They're giving away a certain portion of their resources to a charity of the month. It's just everybody's doing it in their own way, which I love, but we have a lot to be proud of. Last but not least, we also see people before they sell their company deciding a portion of that percentage is going to go back to charity. So we now work with a number of amazing entrepreneurs here in town who have said, I don't need it all. Let's take a cut of it and give it back to the community. I just am super excited about that work here.
Absolutely. It's so touching. And we actually had a listener in conversation ask about how to start a program like this of their own, that knowing that this type of initiative can really increase employee engagement and help tie people to purpose in the organization. How do they get started?
I'll tell you what, they can reach out to me, or I'll give Priscilla over at Higginbotham has just pulled together, we just did this maybe 2 weeks ago, pulled together all the corporate liaisons for Philanthropy. And the room was that people over at Colonial. It's a great room of people, my gosh, Hillwood, Facebook. And it's amazing to see these peers all come together in the same room and see that they're not alone and they can share, great ideas for how to do this effectively.
That's fantastic. So are there best practices then that group works with and says, awesome?
Yeah, absolutely. And they're really, to me, they've been doing it for a while and they've learned a lot of lessons and it's not like they're all in competition with each other, right? They're super willing to share.
That's amazing. And that it really spurs innovation to have that type of support too. So that's exciting. Wonderful. And for those companies and listeners, perhaps, that may not be at that level, maybe it's a small organization of 3 to 5 people. I've seen things like doing a 5K together and raising money, and those types of in-person opportunities to give can just do wonders for even the team building of the organization internally.
Yeah, absolutely. We see that time and again. It's such a bonding experience. Yeah. And we're excited for that. So if anyone wanted to reach out to me, and I'm happy to put you in touch with other good folks that can help you do that well.
That's great. We talk about the Fort Worth way and things that make Fort Worth unique and special. In your perspective, what is different about our culture of giving back?
So I previously worked in San Francisco and Chicago and New York in philanthropy. Great towns, and we got a lot of wonderful work done. I was very struck when I came to Fort Worth about sense of accountability people have here for this place. I think it's a combination of things. I think it's folks that the literature, there's kind of a natural humility, I think, and I find in the people that we work with, the level of caring about what happens here and a willingness to try new things, right? Not to think that they figured it all out. As I find people very willing to try to do the right thing and try to do something that works. Thinking about that as a culture, how fortunate we are to be in a place where people care so much about this place. and are seeing and experiencing this change and growth and wanting to make sure that the experience they've had in Fort Worth can be available to others that are coming behind them.
Yeah.
And so I just love to see that. I met my husband in New York, and I had no idea I'd find myself in Fort Worth, Texas, ever, really. Fort Worth had never crossed my mind before.
Not yet. You hadn't heard
Not
the poem
yet. Where we met. And we were and it was like my second date. We were at some dinner party, and someone asked the question around the table, "What's the best thing about you?" And my husband, who I did not know well at the time, said, "Well, I'm from Fort Worth, Texas." And so I thought, well, that's either the greatest or the weirdest thing I've ever heard. Just like about you was here from Fort Worth, Texas. Now that I know him, and no surprise, we're now back here. We wound up moving back here. But it's because this was a place where his teachers, his, coaches, his friends stuck by him. And that's what he wanted. That's what he recognized and helped make him a great man. And I think about that and I think, gosh, wouldn't it be wonderful if everybody who came from Fort Worth said, well, that's the best thing about me is that I'm from
Holy
here.
smokes.
So I want that to be available for everybody, right? And I think generally speaking, you're going to find that here. And the new folks that are coming, they're coming because they love that, right? That attracts them. So I just want to make sure we open the door wide to help them understand kind of what our history is and importantly, invite their new ideas for how we can become even greater.
Absolutely. I want that story, Rose, told right after somebody tells the story of Amon Carter taking his sack lunch to Dallas.
Yeah.
Then I want that story about your husband told. I think that would be the perfect follow-up.
Okay. Yeah, well, and the fact that what we wound up back here, it's powerful.
It's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And how long have you been in Fort Worth?
Since 2007.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So nearly 20 years. Isn't that wild?
Oh, it's ours. And it's the best. I can't imagine now living anyplace else. That's the best. So
Are making me want to move back.
I
Come
know
on
you
now.
need to.
No.
I'm starting to get worried you're not going to, Emily. You're getting awfully comfortable in Richmond.
Well, one of the reasons we're comfortable here is because it shares some commonalities with Fort Worth. Rose, my husband's an investment banker, and we were either going to Chicago, New York, or Richmond. There's a middle market bank here where he was joining, and we chose here because it felt nostalgic for me. And a lot of the things that you were just describing, everybody goes to, they go to school, they go to elementary school, high school in Richmond, they go to UVA, and then they come back. And a lot of that's very similar to a lot of the stories of Fort Worth, and I miss it a lot. And I also love telling people here that that's where I'm from. And I've decided I'm going to leverage the story that you just told. If anybody ever asks me what's the most interesting thing about me, I'm stealing that one. Unfortunately, the one thing I wish that Richmonders, and it's just a way to get to know one another, but usually the first question, especially to a woman, is where do your kids go to school?
Oh.
And so hopefully I'm going to start asking people, what's the most interesting thing about you? And see if maybe that question catches her.
I like that better than what do you do? Because we've talked about that, Emily, where it's like, it's hard to say I'm a mom or whatever. It's hard to say whatever because we feel this pressure of, is it going to be enough? Are people going to be impressed? What's most interesting about you totally opens the door to actually stuff that's interesting because often what we do isn't.
Well, and to remember too, that there are chapters or seasons of your life that may not be adding up right now, but gosh, they're creating experience that's yours and yours alone. I was home from 2007 to 2013. And I have to tell you, from 2010 to 2013, I started to feel really anxious about what happens next for someone who's in Fort Worth, Texas and can give money away. My great skill was giving money away. It was like, well, good luck to you. But, it adds, somehow it all adds up. And I wouldn't trade that time for the world. But there are different times when you have to put your focus on different things, right?
Since we kind of brought children into the mix, I have one question. Something that I've noticed as a challenge or a hurdle is how do you make sure that your children who have all of their needs met still have a sense of perspective and a grateful heart? And it's very difficult, right? They only know what their reality is. How are they supposed to understand how quote unquote privileged they are? And I've been interested in trying to, very similar to my prior question, how do I get involved as an adult? But also, do you have any recommendations for how you get your kids involved? Is it volunteering at, on Thanksgiving Day to put sandwiches together. Have you noticed any ways that parents can help their children have a healthier sense of perspective early on?
It's not a very obvious answer. Volunteering is fantastic. Those experiences are wonderful. Doing it alongside you, I think, is really important. But your kids are watching you. And it's not just about sort of the volunteer period. It's how do we model a behavior we want to see in them by being good people, being kind to those around us, paying attention, and we're going to pouring into them. And I think when you do that as an individual, I saw my mom do this. Like you think, my gosh, that so many kids, how do you pour into each one? But she really focused on each one of us. And what I watched and I observed over all of her whole lifetime is that she got it back double time, right? She paid close attention, and she was then fortified by that experience of it. She wasn't trying to rush, run through things. So then that went from her children. We did volunteer with her, and it wasn't a checking the box. It was meaningful to her. And she didn't try and do 1,000 hours, but she did 10, in ways that really showed up, paid attention, didn't try and, trumpet it around to everybody. So that was a really important thing for me to watch, that it wasn't something extra. It wasn't something that was proving herself. It wasn't something that was the right thing to do. It was just, her way of giving back, and I saw her fulfilled by it. And so it makes me want to do it because it's been the experience of my life. And I see that now with my kids, not, who knows what'll happen. They're in college and high school now. I'd love to be around them, love to see them pouring into the things that they connect on. But I think not to think of the volume of it or the achievement of it, but really make that connection for yourself. And then it's exponential, the things that come back to you. And for your kids, they will. But I think that they'll watch you doing this and they'll get.
That's beautiful. Can I brag on my 6-year-old really quickly?
Yeah.
She is very empathetic and has a really sensitive heart, but she also appreciates beauty. She's very artistic and she loved to get dressed. And one of the things that I am proud of myself for just doing naturally is I tend to compliment people. If someone's coming out of a coffee shop and she looks lovely, I'll say, "Oh my gosh, you look gorgeous today." And, I've never met this person in my life. It's just something I always enjoy doing. And not long ago, one of the things I've taught Vivian to do from day one is she has to order for herself. So she has to look at the waitress and say, "This is what I would like. Hello, how are you today?" And the gal came up and introduced herself, and Vivian looked up at her and goes, "I love your lipstick." And you could just see the look on this woman's face. And I, in that moment, felt so proud of Vivian for noticing that, for having this wherewithal to even notice that, the confidence to say it. And I hope that, to your point, it doesn't have to just, I appreciate you saying that, because I've been feeling anxious about my kids, not volunteering enough or not being more civically minded at 6 and 3.
Especially the 10-month-old.
And the 10-month-old.
He's real slovenly.
And remembering we have a lot of people around us that are in different economic circumstances. And it may not be a situation where you're at a soup kitchen, but there are people at the gas station, wherever you are. And are we kind, do we treat each other as individuals worthy of respect? And all of that will flow, forward.
It's amazing. Well, you've mentioned your parents a couple of times and the impact they've had on your life. What do you, especially with your mom, Rose, what do you try to bring from your mom into your everyday?
Well, I carry her with me. But she gave me some great advice that I want you two to hear this. I don't know if whoever else is listening, but as women, this is powerful for me. So the last word she said to me before she died, see, she was 90. And she said, "Just be Rosie." And I thought, was that the best thing your mother could ever say to you?
Absolutely.
It's all she wanted me to do. Just be you. And I think it's like, unpack that. But now as I go through the room, literally since she passed, I think about that, just be Rosie. It helps me shed all the be good enough, be this or be that, or try and walk into a room and have everybody think this. This is me. I want to be continuously improving, to be better. But I thought, God, what a gift to me to know that you're enough and you'll be continuing to evolve and change. And that will be you. Don't get fixed into who you were at 20, 30, 40. Step into the place and just be you.
That's amazing.
That's what I'd say to you both. I know you've got great lives and you're on your own journeys, but I just encourage you to do the same because the world needs you.
Thank you so much. That is precious. I remember you telling me your mom had told you one time, maybe it's difficult for us and difficult for others when we try to be perfect. She spoke to that desire for perfectionism that for us, for our listeners, we are trying to achieve in the world. We're trying to push forward. And it's like that gentle balance. I'm bawling my eyes out now. Thanks, Rose.
For her, me too. You brought my mom in the room.
The pushing forward is so important to what we're going to do in the world and impacting others. And then that push and that relentless energy can be harmful and can break us down. Just to balance that part of us being Rosie, being Marianne, being Emily is that natural motivation that we have. And then also reaching towards ourselves with tenderness at the same time.
Yeah.
You know,
And the way you described that, Marianne, makes perfect sound like preposterous, doesn't it? I mean, we're in an ideal form that's going to be always right when it's fixed like that. It's for heaven's sake.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
You miss it. You miss all the fun.
And this is the nuance with which we want to approach ourselves, approach our kids, approach our community. And to go back to your life's work and what you're doing in Fort Worth and broadly in North Texas for kids outside of our own families and for our communities to feel that kind of support like you got from your mom.
Yeah.
And we get from our families. And Emily and I are able to blessedly give each other and give our kids. And that's the spirit of Fort Worth, is we want to take what we've been given and multiply it.
Okay, so I'm ending on my dad's note, which I love that line. It is, take what you've been given, make it a little better, and pass it on.
That's incredible. What a legacy. And look at you. I mean, is your dad passed on too?
He did too,
Yeah. But for them applauding you from heaven just at living their legacy. Holy smokes.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And too, it keeps getting better. So for your kids, they'll take it further. So that's the exciting part. I'm so grateful and excited for you two to be doing this podcast. Thank you for giving me the time to kind of reflect and think about what we're all noticing. But to know for all your listeners, this is really powerful.
Thank you so much. What a gift to have you visit us today and just share everything that's on your heart and so much of your wisdom. I feel like we need you to start a podcast, Rose, so we can listen to Rose's musings. Just be Rosie is what.
Yeah, be Rosie. I was going to say that.
Marianne and Emily are not telling you that they had to teach me how to turn on my camera 5 years after students started.
Rose, thank you so much for the gift.
They're great.
Oh my gosh, for joining us today. And thank you everyone for joining us on The Great Noticing. We can't wait to see you next time. So everybody find our content, like, share, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Great Noticing podcast. Don't forget to rate and review us on your favorite podcast platform. And for more information and to keep up with Marianne and Emily, visit thegreatnoticingpodcast.com. And remember, what are you noticing lately?